everyone, and welcome to the next in our treasure series. I'm really thrilled that my friend Ant is joining us today. Ant, why don't you say hello and introduce yourself to everybody?
Hi, I'm Ant. I've been around for quite a while, as you can see from who I am, but I have a lovely family in Chichester, and I love being part of this church.
Wonderful. So, Ant, this series we've been looking at where God is in all of this pandemic and this COVID stuff that's kind of almost derailed the globe. But we know that from biblical promise that the things of God cannot be shaken. The kingdom can't be shaken, but the world can be. And we've seen the world being shaken. But some of how we live our lives, therefore, has been shaken around a little bit, because some of those things are neither good nor bad. They're just not things of the kingdom, but they get shaken. You know, the fact that I've got a queue to get my supermarket shopping, or, I celebrate, this was so sad. Yesterday, I celebrated finding yeast in the supermarket, as it's been 6 weeks.
Well, you need it.
On that shelf and failed. But I'm not making light of the situation. I know for some people this is very, very serious and huge implications. As you'll have seen, if people have watched others in this series, you'll have seen the big impact that this is having on people. So I don't make light of it in that way. But I'm aware for some of us, particularly those of us who follow Jesus in the West, we're used to this comfortable lifestyle. We're used to just getting on the rails of life and following it through. We're most of the time immune from pain, immune from suffering, immune from discomfort. And when those things show, we throw money at it, we throw resources at it in order to take the suffering and the pain away. So this is hitting those of us in the West really, really hard. And I include myself with that. I haven't suffered badly whatsoever, but it has brought a measure of discomfort to me. I'm not used to that. Now, and for those of us watching today who don't know you, I feel like you're someone who's you've kind of walked this path ahead of us. You've been through a really challenging last 7 or 8 years, and your world's been shaken, and normal things have stopped and ended and been put to one side. And certainties that you rely on or had relied on for the first chapters of your life have changed. So I'm really keen to hear from you today, as someone who kind of has probably got a bit more of a grasp. And I know.
Oh, I don't know about that.
I know you're going to be very humble about this, but someone who's you've kind of walked this path, and for the rest of us, we're only 2.5 months into walking a path that, through some of your experience, you've walked for the last 7-8 years. So I'm really keen to hear from you, and that we, those who are watching, can learn from you. So could you just give us a little bit of your journey over the last 7 years?
Wow, it's a journey. The journey's a journey, and it's interesting times that we're in. But I almost feel like some of what's happened for me has been preparation for this, and I feel quite prepared for lockdown. There's always something I'm keeping my eye on in the news or somewhere, whether it be famine, massive famine, whether it be fires in Australia, whether it be flooding around the country, whatever it is. There's always something big that's overshadowing what's going on, and all those things are huge. And the coronavirus is massive, and then recession could possibly be even worse, or the next thing that's talked, lockdown, is a really hard thing to then have involved in our lives. And I don't know, I think about these things. I'm a real thinker. For those of you that don't actually know me, I also was a big doer. I spent the first 50 odd years of my life being the person that did everything for everybody all the time. Whenever you needed something, I could be there. And I would jump to it. I would love that challenge. I wanted to be there. I wanted to do and serve and look after people. I wanted, that's what I lived for. And, and I look back on my life and all that was then, and I just think, it was just amazing, and I loved it, and I felt that my life was full. And then I don't know, 6 years or so ago now, my life changed fairly drastically. I was diagnosed with a very powerful blood-based cancer, which sort of changed everything pretty much overnight. It changed everything, and I had to go through some incredibly intensive treatment. I had to have bone marrow transplant, stem cell transplant. I had blood transfusions, chemotherapy, radiotherapy, and I still am ongoing even today. Even today, every day at 9:15, my alarm on my phone goes off, and I have to take regular medication. In the evening, I have to do the same, and it's part of my life now. And I sort of think there's these big things that overshadow life, but actually some of us walk with things now every day. And I know that I'm one of those people. I know that my family are one of those families who walk with things. And, I think, whether you're walking with things like debt or depression, or whether you're walking with disability, or whether you're walking with loss, whether you're walking with fear, or whether you're walking, whatever you're walking with in your life, whatever it is, walking with it is hard. When something comes and overshadows a big thing, it comes and it goes, and the news then finishes at some point. And I know some things go on longer than others, as this is, but then there's things that we walk with, and I just feel like when it comes to walking with these things, we end up feeling like we're walking in darkness, we're walking in shadows, we're walking blindfolded. We don't really know what's going on, and for me, my journey has been much like that. I've had some of the worst, most frightening, most terrifying times when I've been just a fraction away from death, being kept alive by machines that are doing my breathing for me, that are keeping my blood flowing for me, by health professionals who are just in the right place at the right time, just to keep me alive, by chemicals that are put in my body which you wouldn't put into anybody because they're deadly, but they are able to work against the thing that I have that is affecting my life. And I look at that and I think about those things, and it does make me think, and it makes me think about how life is. It makes me think about the shadows that I walk through. A verse that I'd just like to share with you from the Bible.
Please do.
Is a verse from Psalm 23, which just says, "And although I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I won't be afraid because you are with me." And in all of my journeying, in the highs and the lows, the security and the safety that I have found in knowing God as my own, in knowing God as my God, as real, and knowing that He is there, that God is with me every single step that I journey, has been what's kept me going, has given me the hope that I have for now.
And that's beautiful. A beautiful, well-known bit of scripture, but just even the way you just phrased that made me think of it in a fresh way. So thank you for that. Now, you clearly have a faith. You're referencing the scripture,
yes.
Bible. There, you're referencing being part of a church for a long time.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
A question that could easily be thrown by people towards you, by people beyond the faith community or the Jesus following tradition, and maybe even a question from within those who would call themselves followers of Jesus, could be, well, where's God in all of this, Ant? How do you know He walks with you through what has been a long season of suffering? So kind of what would you do with that question as it's passed your way?
Again, it's a huge thinker, because there are many times when I have screamed out as if God doesn't exist, because I have thought that I've been left alone. But then also I've realized that even though I am someone who has a faith, who believes that God is real, that actually that doesn't exempt me from the things that are in the world. It doesn't exempt me from coronavirus. It doesn't exempt me from cancer. It doesn't exempt me from traveling a journey that is quite frightening and fearful and intrusive into my body. It doesn't exempt me from that, but there's something about the choice that I made over 40 years ago now, Daniel. I know.
You don't look it. You're wearing it well.
Yeah, over 40 years ago, I made a choice, and I'm still working with that choice. The choice I made was to say that I actually believed that God was real. And I think that choice planted a seed in me, and it's that seed that I've carried. It's that I've carried. It's sort of like, for me, it was like finding, I look back on it now, and it was like finding the most precious, valuable thing that I actually didn't realize how valuable it was at the time. But I knew it was valuable, and I wanted it. And I made a choice, and I just said, okay, God, I am going to give it a go. And I want to try and follow you and follow what you want and try and involve you in my life and every aspect and everything that happens in my life. And that's what I chose to do. And I think that knowing that deep down, when it's come to it, there's been times when everything that I have has been stripped away. There hasn't been anything left. Honestly, I can tell you of moments that I can recall in fear and in my nightmare, worst nightmares at the moment, of times when I lay facing a plastic wall or a plastic machine covered in clinical things, medical things that I was gazing at, just actually saying, okay, God, if you do exist, take me now, because I can't do this anymore. But then I just felt God just say, it's okay, I'm still here. I'm still here. I'm still here. And it reminded me of a wonderful little story of it's called Footprints. It's something called Footprints. And if you've never heard of this, please look it up, Google it, do whatever you want to do just to find this yourself, because it's about someone who had a dream one night, and they dreamt that their whole life shot before them, and that when they saw their whole life, which I have done a few times now, my life shooting before me, they saw these footprints in the sand. There was two sets of footprints, and there was their footprints and there was God's footprints going along in the sand. And then they looked, and they looked back, and they saw the footprints, and they thought, wow, look at those there along all the walking of my life. But hang on a minute, in the hardest bits, the worst bits, there's only my footprints there, and God's leaving me, and he's not there, and God isn't with me. And actually then God spoke, and God said, actually, it's not quite like that. It's the other way around. In those moments when you only see one set of footprints, that's when I was carrying you. And I know, and I have felt, and I have sensed that carrying. It was only God's footprints because I didn't have anything left in me at the time. But I had God, and he carried me through those times, and then ready to place me down again, to walk again when I was ready to. And those times have happened numerously now. And over the last 6 years or so, in and out of hospital, in intensive isolation, under intensive cancer treatment. And there have been some amazing moments of knowing God's carrying ability. And also the carrying ability of the people that he's placed around me. Because God, sometimes you can't see and can't feel, but he is there in the people around you. And I've found that actually God's carried me in the people, friends like you, Dan, and friends like others that hopefully maybe even listening to this now, who know that you have played a valuable, important part in my life. in knowing that I'm being carried and helped, looking after my family when I'm not around, looking after my boys and my daughter, my wife when I'm not there, has been amazing moments of carrying. And I've felt that. And at the moment, when we're in this time, there are so many people reaching out and meeting people's needs and helping to carry the load. And you may be one of the people being carried, or you may be one of the people who's helping to carry. And for me, those are so valuable, and they're so memorable and so needed.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Sorry.
Can I pick up on one of the threads you've said there around, I think you used the phrase intensive lockdown. We're all in lockdown right now, although that's this moment of recording starting to ease off a little bit. That feels very uncomfortable for me because I've never been in a scenario like that before. But it sounds like over this last 6 years for you, you've been in lockdown before. Yes. And I know that you're in a lockdown which is different to my lockdown right now because of your battle. So, and I know I visited you in lockdown in those strange compressed rooms where you have to go through 7 doors and swear 27 times that you're not carrying any infection because you were so seriously ill.
And it was lovely seeing you dressed in green rubber, Dan. That was the other thing that was really good.
That was our secret. So you've been there, Ant. You've walked through lockdown numerous times over the last 6 years. I haven't, and I'm sure most people watching haven't. How have you found your way through lockdown with keeping your emotional and your spiritual well-being in a really good place? So in isolation, when you're just you in that room where there's 1 or 2 medical staff come in and out in a day, and that's all your interaction, you can't touch anyone. How have you done that? Help us. What have you learned?
What I've learned is that actually, I refer back to God again, that God has never pushed me beyond what I have, the resources and what he has given me. And on many, many occasions in hospital isolation, I was in rooms that were just sort of 14-foot square for long periods of time. And for the bulk of that, just not able to remove myself from a bed position and having to be fed with drips and blood being put in and out of me to look after me and keep me alive. And those times, I don't know, I've been able to dig deep, and I think for me it's that being able to dig deep. And in fact, things that I thought of as, learning Bible stories when I was little, learning songs, learning how to do things that I just thought, it's just something that you just do. But actually, I was able to draw on what was within me that God had placed there. That other people had placed there, words that people had said to me, text that people sent me that I was able to use as a resource, just a smile through a pane of glass in an isolated room, were suddenly changed my whole view of what was most important, the big valuable things, the huge things that I'd in my past always valued and thought were going to be my big achievements, my academic achievements, my financial achievements, my job, my work, my new cars, my house, all these things suddenly paled into insignificance when I then realized that actually the things that kept me going were hearing a voice that I recognized, were words in a text that came from someone that I knew, were a wave through a glass window, were a nurse walking in and just acknowledging that I was there. It suddenly changed my whole view of what was really valuable. And I know that we all have found that with lots of this, that there's things that we found that are so valuable that we actually didn't realize we had, the resources we had. And for me, on a personal level, it was the knowledge and things I was able to recall, the memories I was able to live in, the things I was able to bring back to my mind. In particular, for me, it was stories that I'd learnt of the life of Jesus, stories that I'd learnt from all the time before Jesus was alive, before Jesus was born as a human form. He was there, but it was before that, with all the Old Testament stories, the things that were important and value about them, how God spoke to people and how God was speaking to me. And things would come into my mind, and odd little moments would just become so valuable. Just a touch, just a momentary thought of something, just all those things were what kept me going and what keep me going now. And life is full of complexities, and there's so much we still have to do. We still got to pay the bills, we still got to do the washing up, we still got to clean the car even though we're not using it. We've got all those things we've got to do, but actually within that, the valuable things that I've found are looking at my children, are sharing a moment with my wife, a hand touch, or a thought, or a little memory, or something like this. And it's things that I have in here that I can actually draw upon. And as we dig deeper with things like lockdown and with isolation, the resources are there. The resources are there, and God helps us.
Can I ask you a question about that resources? Because for some people who may be watching this, they haven't had a 40-year journey with God.
No.
And I'm one of those. Not quite that old yet, but I'm chasing you down hard.
Yeah.
Where do you start? So what are your patterns for embedding some of those things so clearly deep into the core of who you are, that when challenge strikes, when crisis hits, when trauma washes over you, you find yourself being able to go to those places? So just very practically, and what are some of the patterns that you have to make sure that those treasures are available to you when you need them?
I do. I'm a real believer in routine, in trying to keep a vague pattern, like lots of us have needed to do during this time. If we can involve pattern and routine in our lives, it helps us through. I try to start every day of my life when I wake up. I try to start by just saying good morning to God, just by talking to God, just with a little conversation. I've tried to introduce that with my family, in particular with my two boys, that we spend a little time just saying, okay, God, we know that we're going to spend a lot of the day not even thinking about you, because we'll be dashing off on the trampoline or running or digging this or going somewhere. But actually, let's start our day. Let's try to welcome God in. Let's try to keep those little treasure moments that we possibly can special and valuable. And that's what, I try to do that. So we use little children's Bible notes, and I find great use from those, just little stories all the time. We have a fun way of praying together as a family. We all put our hands out, and we put hands on top, like that old game where you used to pull your hands out of the way, and we put our hands in, and then the hand at the bottom prays and then pulls out, and then the next hand prays, and then the next hand prays, and we try to pray to keep ourselves together, but also with that connection with God. We try to talk about things when they happen. So when something happens that is useful for a conversation, whether it be a wonderful time of celebration, or whether it be an argument or a frustration, we try to then look at that. We try to involve that in what we're doing. We wonder whether God's involved in that, or whether it's just us, because we're given so much freedom in our lives that actually it's wonderful to think that God's with us every step of the way, but he gives us a whole life to live, and it's just involving him in that I try to do, that we try to do. And so I try to do that. I try to read something from my Bible. I have an app on my iPad which actually pops up a verse a day, and sometimes, and it has been in the past, that's been the only little bit that I've ever read in that whole day. But actually I still think that, you know, I was excited to see the other day, I just topped over 1,500 days of this app, and I was thinking, wow, that's actually sort of 4 or 5 years worth of this verse a day. And I think, I'm so glad I did that. I'm so glad I started it when I did. And
that doesn't sound very intrusive at all, even for people whose lives are chaotic with work or children or whatever dynamics. That's just a kind of, I love, in what you've just said, Ant, I love your institution almost in your family of, we start each day with the Lord, and then everything else comes after that.
It does, and then also, I mean, with things like meal times, we try to spend at least one meal a day together around the table eating, because lives are busy with various different things. We all try together, and we also we try to use that as a time to talk about little things, only little things. It's not, we're not having these big deep discussions all the time. It's just to keep it ticking over, to keep that going, and with that little habit, it's good. We say a grace or a thank you for our food, and that can expand or not, as the case may be. We have a dice that we roll sometimes, which has got different prayers on it. So sometimes we just roll the dice and read what's on there to say thank you for our food, and things like that have been things that we've added in over the years that we've enjoyed, and that's it's made a difference. And at the end of the day, we also try to just sort of have a little think about our day. And especially with the boys, when popping them into bed, it's like, let's just thank God for today. Some bits have been awful, some bits have been disastrous, and we want to forget them. But let's just thank God that he's been with us in the good bits and the bad bits. Let's pray for our friends. Let's pray for our family. Let's just think about God for a little while as we drift off, and he replenishes our body overnight.
That is so good. Thank you. I really like what you're sharing about having that rhythm to a day.
Yeah.
And at times when that rhythm needs to adjust a little bit because there's certain things happening that day that don't allow, or it doesn't go that way. But I think having a rhythm and a pattern, sort of fixed markers through this as we walk this uncharted path in lockdown, hearing from a lockdown expert.
I don't think there's ever a time that any of us are able to say that we are an expert at these things, because everything is different for every person. And I look out there at all the people that are miraculously living the differences that their lives have and how they're doing it. And I think and pray for all sorts of people every day, and I just think it's amazing that my little story, I hope, will just actually, maybe just if it's just one of you there who's listening to this, if there is one, there might just be you and me, Dan. But if there's one person listening to this and you just think, well, actually, God's speaking to me through this, then I want you, like I did about 40 years ago, I found something that I didn't realise was going to be the most valuable treasure of my whole life. I found something, and I've let it grow in my life, and I'm now letting it grow in my family's life and in my friends and through my church and through all the things that I'm involved in. And my life has gone from being a very super active and everything to being very isolated. And it's very different, but that seed's still growing. And every day I'm still trying to get it right. I'm making so many mistakes, Dan, so many mistakes I make. But I also have lots of little successes, and those little treasures are the things that I hold on to, and those little treasures are the things that I know have grown from that seed that was the treasure I started with. And I just hope there's someone there that can maybe hear that and know that God's speaking to you.
The end of that verse that we've drawn from in Isaiah, it kind of lands in a way where we find these treasures so that we know that God is with us, that he is God, and that he then calls us by name. It's not like this unpersonal blanket thing, but we are called by name by God. And that's why we find these treasures in these hard places. So we know he's God, and we know he cares for us each individually, as well as globally on mass as humanity and all of creation even. But he calls us by name. It's just a beautiful thing. And I could talk to you for hours, as we have regularly in the past, and I'm sure we will do in the future. But I'm going to draw us to a close there for this for today. But thank you so much.
If you want to hear any more, there's loads more stories. And
I know there is.
I just love it. Thank you, Dad. Thank you for letting me be involved today.
Oh, brilliant. Well, on behalf of everyone who's watched, and just thank you for your honesty and for your help. You know, I really genuinely do see you as a guide. I know you're distancing yourself from expertise, and I understand why, and rightly so, but you've walked this path before us, and so really appreciate your reflections and sharing what you've learned as you've walked it over these last 6 years or so. So thanks, Ant.
You're welcome.
Appreciate what you've shared.
Love to all.